Welcome to Stay at Home Connect. I'm Phyllis Jackson.
COVID-19, a virus we only learned about last year, has now become the leading cause of death in the United States, surpassing heart disease and cancer. Fulton, DeKalb, and Gwinnett seeing the most cases so far statewide, as many Georgia hospitals are approaching capacity with numbers we haven't seen since August. Emory reporting double its hospitalized COVID patients. Northside experiencing a 100% rise in newly admitted patients. I caught up with Dr. Danny Brandstetter. He's WellStar's medical director of infection prevention.
Talk to us a little bit about the demographics that you're seeing in terms of cases there at WellStar throughout that hospital system.
We're still seeing a lot of infections that are coming in later in the course. So around 8 to 10 days of their illness, they're showing up. And unfortunately, this is not just in people who are older or people who have comorbidities. We're seeing young people, we're seeing people a mix of race. So we're still seeing Latino population, we're still seeing the African American population, we're still seeing Caucasians. All are affected by this. And so we're seeing that in our hospitals. We're seeing it requiring just a regular medical floor and medical management all the way up to the ICU level of care.
President-elect Joe Biden says when he takes office in January, he will ask Americans to wear masks for 100 days. Medical experts believe a 100-day timeline will be enough for 100 million of the most vulnerable to get the vaccine. Biden has also asked that Dr. Anthony Fauci stay on and become his chief medical advisor. President-elect Biden says once Dr. Fauci announces that the vaccine is safe, he's willing to take the injection publicly, as are former presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton. Researchers at Georgia State University say an antiviral drug developed to treat influenza is showing promise against the coronavirus. It suppresses the transmission of COVID-19 in ferrets within 24 hours. The medication is now part of clinical trials for patients who are currently hospitalized. Right now, remdesivir is the only FDA-approved antiviral for COVID. Atlanta Public Schools hosts a live town hall to announce a January 2021 plan to return to in-person learning.
If we see a pattern of increase in the surge, we will pause and take need or notice of what we must do. But our intent is to move towards a reopening. But we cannot do that unless we can commit to effective mitigation strategies.
APS Superintendent Dr. Lisa Herring says families will still have the option of virtual instruction. Parents will need to fill out an intent to return form by December 21st. The Atlanta City Council reminds you to vote during the general election runoff. December 7th is the deadline to register to vote. Early voting begins December 14th. If you are a movie fan, Warner Brothers has a Christmas present for you.
There's something happening. In the next year, Warner Brothers Pictures is bringing you the biggest premieres.
So this is the Suicide Squad.
In theaters and streaming exclusively on HBO Max. The exact same day.
Grab your popcorn. Streaming begins December 25th.
We'll see you on the next episode of Stay at Home Connect.
First of all, I want to thank Trees Atlanta and their partners who have come out this morning in East Atlanta. We're quite near the village, and this is a very established community with a lot of old growth trees, but we need to replace trees and we need to increase our tree canopy. And so what's happening today through Plant Atlanta is an opportunity for the tree canopy to increase in this area. We're planting trees in the public right-of-way, and I'm so happy that Trees Atlanta is not only going to educate neighbors on the proper way to plant trees and to take care of trees, but they're going to come back and continue to maintain them until they're strong enough for nature and for neighborhood volunteers to take over.
Yeah, I'm out here with residents of Ponce Highland along with good folks at Trees Atlanta, planting trees here in the neighborhood, but also we're doing this all over the city, which is important to our tree canopy and continue to make our neighborhoods shady and lovely. So we're planting, I don't know, probably 50, 60 trees in a couple streets here, and it's great to see so many people out engaged in the neighborhood. I was telling the folks out here today that they're poets, because one of my favorite quotes about trees is from the poet Khalil Gibran, who said, trees are the poems that the earth writes upon the sky. And so everyone today is planting a tree that will one day be a backdrop on the sky when we look up. And so we're all a little bit doing our role to be poets today in Ponce Highland and across the city.
We were surprised by the rain, I will tell you that. So we don't have to add the water because Mother Nature provided the water for us today. It's raining and it's fine because trees love rain. So today, Council District 11, which is myself and our entire team, we're here planting 40 trees at Greenbrier Mill. And that's in partnership with Trees Atlanta. And the reason is because Atlanta is known as the city in the forest. And my district, District 11, has the second most beautiful canopy, the largest canopy in the city of Atlanta. So we want to preserve that. We want to make sure that every opportunity that we get, we are planting more trees and we're taking care of the ones that we already have. So that's what we're doing today, and the community has joined us. They registered and they joined us, and we're planting these trees over at Greenbrier Mill.
Yeah, so we've got a tree planting here today by Trees Atlanta for the city of Atlanta, and I think it's really appropriate given that we are in Atlanta, the city in a forest. So we're helping to make the forest even bigger here in Atlanta. Actually planted trees with Trees Atlanta a lot in the past. I remember planting about 15 years ago in Chastain Park, and it's fun to go by and see those trees and how they've grown in 15 years. And this is about quality of life. This is about making sure that we are green and that we remain that city in a forest.
At the end of today, we would have planted over 500 trees in the city of Atlanta, consisting of every single council district. We're here at Westview Cemetery along the M.L. King Jr. Drive corridor, and we are so happy that Trees Atlanta has chosen this spot, Westview Cemetery, to plant over 40 trees today. We're here with over 100 volunteers. Trees are vital to oxygen. We depend on them for wildlife. And we are so happy to have planted over 500 trees at the end of today, celebrating Plantlanta here in the city of Atlanta. I want to thank Trees Atlanta and all of their magnificent staff and volunteers for being here. Okay.
What's going on today?
Today we're in West End at the Goodwill, and I'm one of the people that are being honored as an unsung hero.
Cleta is my girl. Cleta is one of the hardest working council members in the city.
Cleta's been providing leadership on council since I was in kindergarten.
Search that girl right now. What would you say? What would you say to her?
You mean from back then?
Just talk to her. Just talk to her.
Wow, you come a long way. And you're not done yet. You still got many miles to go.
Did she believe she would get on a wall?
No.
She didn't do it for the wall, did she?
It's very special to be honored. Somebody wanted my photograph a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't send it. I said, I don't need to be honored. So I didn't think any more about it until somebody sent me the mural, a picture of the mural. So I thought they were playing a joke on me, so I had to come over and see it. So it's a privilege. Tennessee State University and Clark Atlanta University School of Social Work helped to make me. but God has led me to this place, and I'm very grateful.
Job well done, madam.
Very good.
Job well done. Job well done.
Thank you.
We're right at Matt. 5. Oh, and Matt. Okay. We're right at 5. Let me give it maybe another 30 seconds to a minute to make sure that if we have any more council members to join. Those of you that are tuned in to either our Channel 26 or Twitter or Facebook, thank you for being here. I just want to make sure we give everybody technical time to get onto this work session. And Ms. Pulandini, you're also you're on as well, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Okay, and Mr. Rowan, who else from your team should be on just so we can make sure that we can hear them as well?
It is, it's a solo effort tonight. Nobody else needs to be on the line.
Oh, okay.
Solo as far as speaking.
Right. Good deal. All right. We're going to give it another 10 to 15 seconds and we'll get started. Too bad you guys can't see me. My job had a ugly sweater engagement virtually just now. So I still have on an ugly Christmas sweater and I think it's cool. Let's see. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Sidewalk Funding Work Session here for the Atlanta City Council. This is the Transportation Committee's meeting here Wednesday, December 9th at 5 p.m. It's via teleconference and online. You can share this with your friends via Facebook Live, Twitter, at ATL Council, and on the City Council's homepage, citycouncil.atlantagA.gov, and some of you are watching on Comcast Channel 26. So while this is a Transportation Committee, effort, we have several members of the City Council to join us today. So my name is Andre Dickens. I have the pleasure of serving as your Transportation Committee Chairman, and we also have our Vice Chair here, which is Marcy Collier Overstreet. Say hello, Ms. Overstreet.
Hello. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Transportation Committee members Matt Westmoreland and Amir Faroki. You guys can say hello.
Greetings.
Hello. All right, good. Just want them to know that you're real. And we also have been joined by Carla Smith, who is our District 1 representative. Ms.
Yes,
Smith?
I care about sidewalks and all things transportation. Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you for being here as always. Are there any other council members that have just joined?
Joyce Shepard.
Great. Thank you for being here, Ms. Shepard from District 12. Thank you for joining this work session. Anyone else? Any other council members? Okay. If others join, I'll be sure to announce them. We have several members on. And again, and then we're also joined by our Commissioner, Josh Rowan, Commissioner of the Atlanta Department of Transportation. Commissioner, you want to say hello?
Good evening. I'll spare you the sweatshirt I'm wearing.
Okay. All right. I think hopefully it says Go Jackets or something Georgia Tech on it. So thank you all for joining and tuning in. This year, the City Council's Transportation Committee, along with full council, has spent a lot of time in conversations regarding sidewalks and, of course, regarding all of our transportation methods and modes. But during COVID, we spent a lot of time enacting policies, trying to make sure that we continue to improve our sidewalks, our city's walkability, our city's safety, whether that be by increasing the projects that we do for new construction of sidewalks or plans for maintenance of sidewalks that are not in the best shape, for just reporting on sidewalks and also getting a good inventory of the condition of sidewalks in the north and in the south. We've been doing that this year, as well as things such as street lighting, which of course covers our sidewalks and our roads. But the most important question of all is, while we want sidewalks throughout our city for safety and walkability, is how do you pay for them? How do we make sure that we can fund as many sidewalks as we can? And so most of the City Council's Committee on Transportation, we have all pretty much shared in co-sponsoring or sponsoring and authoring legislation related to sidewalks. Mr. Faroki has some, Ms. Overstreet has some, I have some, and most council members have either had some directly or sponsored some. I know in the districts, individuals have done sidewalk papers, whether that's with their Renew Atlanta T-Splosh money or with with fees from various developments that have gone in. Impact fee papers. So all of the above. So everybody's committed to trying to have more sidewalks. So we thought it would be good to get everybody on the line to talk through sidewalks. And I just got a text that says Mr. Dustin Hillis, Councilman Dustin Hillis is on from District 9. Dustin, would you like to say hello?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for you and the Transportation Committee for organizing this.
Great. Thank you for being here. So now I will turn it over to Ms. Pulandini so she can read the statement about remote meetings, and then we'll go ahead on and send it over to Commissioner Rowan, unless another council member would want to speak after that. So first, let's hear the remote statement from Ms. Pulandini, and then we'll see if council members want to do any kind of intro, and then we can go to Josh Rowan. Ms. Pulandini?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This sidewalk funding work session is hosted by the Transportation Committee and being conducted remotely as advertised and as in accordance with OCGA 50-14-1. The public may access the meeting by dialing 877-579-6743, conference ID 831-599-1256, which was noted on the work session's public notice. The public may also view the meeting on Channel 26, the Council's homepage, at citycouncil.atlantagA.gov, the Council's YouTube channel, and the Council's Facebook and Twitter pages via @ATL Council. Additionally, the public was able to leave comments for the work session up until between the hours of 4 and 7 p.m. yesterday at 404-330-6021. The work session agenda and presentation were made available on the Atlanta City Council Transportation Committee presentation page, and they were distributed to all council members beforehand. Speakers must be acknowledged by the presiding officer prior to speaking. Thank you all in advance for your cooperation.
All right, great. Thank you for that statement. Are there any council members that want to just chime in and say anything about how they feel about sidewalks?
This is Councilmember Winslow. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Winslow. Glad that you're here.
Yes, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're having this work session for because sidewalks seem to be the what I want to say, the sexy thing that's happening now, and a lot of people are just asking for sidewalks. I mean, every meeting that I'm in the district that I serve, people are asking for more and more sidewalks. And, you know, as we all know, we've got an old city, and there's just so many sidewalks that are crumbling and in disrepair. So I'm just happy that we're having this meeting. And I know right now we don't have enough money. You know, we just got, I think, $4 million in our citywide account, if I'm correct, Mr. Chair, to go around for the whole city. And so we've got to find other ways to, I guess, try to stretch it and get a little more bang for our buck. So thank you for convening this evening.
Right. Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right. We don't have as much money as we'd like to have to do this, so we gotta plan it out. So thank you for being here, Ms. Winslow. Have any other council members joined since we started? And okay,
Councilmember Matsakite joined.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Matsakite, for being here. Anyone else? Okay, so I'll just do a recap for anybody that just joined. So right now we have Councilmember Dickens, myself, Councilmember Overstreet, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Faroki, Councilmember Westmoreland, Hillis, Winslow, and Mazakite. Did I miss anyone?
Shepherd.
Oh, Shepherd. Sorry, Councilmember Shepherd. I apologize. Yep. And Councilmember Shepherd. So we have lots of members here. Again, if anybody else wanted to say anything before we turn it over to Mr. Rowan. Commissioner Rowan. Okay.
Chair, this is Marcy Overstreet. I really would like to save my comments until after the presentation, if that's fine.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So just to go over the agenda, that's great that you mentioned that, Ms. Overstreet. So we'll have Commissioner Rowan speak now and go over his presentation, which Ms. Pulandini emailed it to all of us. So you'd have to check it out in your email, his presentation, or watch it as we go through it on social media or Channel 26. Then we will have a discussion about what we've seen in the presentation, and then we'll play the public comment. There's only a few public comments that were left earlier, and then we'll also go to some of the questions and answers, some of the questions that might have come in while we've been having this meeting. There might be some questions that come in over Facebook or Twitter. And then we'll talk next steps and then adjourn. So during that discussion part after Mr. Rowan speaks is when council members can just ask away questions to him and make statements. All right, so now let's turn it over to Mr. Rowan. The floor is all yours, Commissioner.
This is Archibald. Just want to say I'm on the call.
Great. Thank you for joining as well, Councilmember Archibald. So we have a lot of the districts covered, so thank you all for joining. All right, Mr. Rowan?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think congratulations are in order. Look forward to working with you again next year in Transportation Committee. So today I'm going to start off. I'll probably speak more to the title slide than I have in the past, so forgive me in advance for that. But the presentation's titled State of Good Repair, Infrastructure, Finance, and Work Session. And as I was developing this, it took me back to a time in the early 2000s when I was assigned to a large T-SPLOST program in the metro area. At the time, there were really only two big ones, so you've got a 50-50 chance of figuring that one out. But I sat with the finance director, and she laid it out very clearly to me that when you're looking at a major capital program, you talk about revenue, and then you stop talking, and then you talk about cost. And don't intermingle those conversations. And I think through much of 2020, we've had some really good conversations on the cost side, on expenditures, on sort of the here and now within DOT. And I love what Councilmember Winslow said about sidewalks are the sexy thing now. They're certainly important. They're certainly getting a lot of attention. And so the timing is really good to talk about the revenue side of it. So just keeping in mind that's the avenue we're taking. On slide 2, you'll see our agenda, and it's a very brief agenda because we only have 4 real bullet points tonight. As always, we're going to do a safety moment at ATL DOT. Safety is our business. Much like a good team project, we're going to lay out some assumptions that I would say in advance we could negotiate and discuss and refine, but I think they're pretty close for today's discussion. We're going to define what this infrastructure program looks like, and then we're going to do some math together and figure out how long we think we can take to get this done. And the final bullet point, Mr. Chairman, as a result of our 4 overtime loss to Georgia State, I've been having to wear Georgia State blue all week, and so my left hand, Alexis Waywu, gave us a Georgia State themed presentation as she reminds me that downtown beat midtown. So back to the presentation and our safety moment.
But right before you do that, Commissioner Rowan, we've been joined also by Councilmember Antonio Brown. I just wanted to make sure I stated who's all on the call. So go ahead and carry on.
So our safety moment, for those of you in Transportation Committee, you've seen this. I've used this one through much of the fall. I think it's a great visual from our friends at NACTO. And in the top picture, you can see at 10 to 15 miles an hour, The bright portion of the top photo is essentially what you see as a driver. So you see the street, you see the parked cars, you see the pedestrians and the sidewalks, you can even see some storefronts. Quickly ramp your speed up to 40 miles an hour, and here's what you see in the bottom picture. And so you basically see nothing. You're in a tunnel. You don't see the sidewalks. You don't see the people walking. And so as we go into the presentation tonight, I think it's really important that we keep in mind that the sidewalk infrastructure is very important, and it has to be part of the bigger safety initiatives. I frequent several multi-use trails that are adjacent to 5-lane roads, and I will tell you that that's not the most comfortable experience. And so we don't want to lose sight of the safety initiative, but we also want to really take a deep dive into where we believe some of the state of good repair funding can come from. And for many who've heard me speak publicly, I tell people I believe you can fit the One Atlanta Strategic Transportation Plan into one of three buckets. And the first bucket is safety, the second bucket is the state of good repair, and the third bucket is actually bus efficiency. I think today's discussion with sidewalks actually fits in all three. And so there's certainly safety improvements we need to make. There are just basic repairs we need to make. There are areas that are woefully lacking in sidewalks that need them, that are transit dependent. And then lastly, we know that if you're a transit rider, you're walking as soon as you get off the bus. And so what meets you there is very important. And so let's move on to slide 4 and our assumptions. The first one, this presentation is fairly numerical. So for someone like me, this is actually kind of fun. I get to dive into the numbers. I'll try not to go too deep into them, but this is really a math exercise today. The second item, these are estimated costs, and so we've based them on prices we're seeing today. Obviously, we don't know what prices will be 5, 10, 15 years from now, but we've got to get ourselves in the right range as we start planning. So just know that at this stage, there could be as high as 15% variability. I don't think that's a big thing when you see the size numbers we're talking about, because really what we're talking about is approach and what tools can we use to achieve our stated goals. I've already kind of touched on the third bullet point. We're using today's numbers as best we can. The fourth thing is that this presentation is really meant to be citywide, where we're not really modeling one district or the other, but we're using the macro numbers that we have for the city and looking essentially at how do we repair what we have and have sidewalk on at least one side of the road, preferably two, but we know that's doubling the price. The other thing that I have done is, since the financial discussion is really the same for any of our infrastructure asset classes. And so I'm making this a larger state of good repair discussion. So we're going to incorporate numbers for our pavement condition. I want to be very, very mindful of the legislation that Councilmember Matsugai introduced, because we're doing the same exercise with pavement as we are with sidewalks. And then I wanted to add bridges, because the bridges don't get a lot of attention, but they need some attention. And so these are the three categories that we're gonna pull together and look at the number that we're trying to achieve, and then what time frame that we're headed towards. I've already talked about the next to last bullet point, and then the last one's a little bit of nuance, but I knew somebody on my team might pick on me for it. We're also not trying to estimate the continued degradation over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We could easily do that and add the number to it. Just we didn't have the time to pull a number together that we were comfortable with. The theory being that the sooner we do it, the less of that we have to account for. So for those, that is one gap, but I don't believe it's significant. So let's just jump into the numbers real quickly. These are all things we've talked about in the past year. I'm not going to take a real deep dive, but when you look at the asphalt, the streets we have in the city, we're estimating about $800 million to repair that in today's dollars. And if you recall, 60% of our streets are rated fair or worse condition-wise. and that's a significant amount of pavement that needs to be addressed. On the sidewalk repair side, this number has been around 850, 900 million for most of our conversations. It's still there. We continue to drill into the sidewalk data, but again, the thing to note is, as we get into next year, we're going to be talking more about how we prioritize repairs. And so this is both repair and construction, because we want to be addressing risk and serving the highest number of users. And so it's not necessarily a one or the other discussion. The bridge rehabilitation, we do have some aging bridges and that do need attention. And so that number is set at 350 million. And so altogether, we're looking at about a $2.1 billion infrastructure program. And so because the projects don't build themselves, I've added 25% overhead and also technical support. So that would be design, right-of-way acquisition, survey, geotech, all the pre-construction stuff that goes into delivering a project. That number could be fine-tuned as we go a little deeper, but it's at 25%. And so the number to remember as we move forward through this presentation is 2.625 billion. 2.6 billion. That's the number we're talking about when we say state of good repair. And so one of the exercises that we used to do back to those days as a young project manager is just simply take the total program and divide it by the time that we think we could achieve it, or the time that we desire to achieve the delivery of the program. And so you can see at a 10-year delivery schedule, you're looking at an investment of $263 million per year, which is roughly 4 times the current Renew program, just for scale. At 15 years, $175 million. Generally speaking, and I put it in red, when we have these types of discussions, 25 years is kind of a target that we use, and then we build around that. So you can see at 25 years, the needed investment would be about 105 million per year. So let's talk about where this money comes from. And there's there are only so many places that transportation comes from. I remember as a former consultant, I had some colleagues who wanted to sell services, and they came up with this whole innovative infrastructure finance, and they knew where to find the money. And the reality is we only have so many buttons we push. But I think there are opportunities to look into new mechanisms, and we're going to touch on that for a little bit. But we're really going to focus on the ones that are here in front of us that we have some control over. So obviously we have the general fund. Quick impact fee discussion. This is simply a numerical exercise. It's not meant to have any commentary on impact fees. State funds and federal funds, just to look at how much we pull in there and opportunities that I think we have to see more. A discussion on T-SPLOST. And then in the innovative finance, there are a few items that we want to vet. We want to research a little more. So this is not meant to champion those issues. It's also not meant to cut them down. But we do want to mention them because they are options. So it's the general fund discussion, slide 8. This is a snapshot of ATL DOT. In fiscal year 21, we're roughly speaking a $48 million department. And the way that $48 million breaks down is that's $20 million for the labor within DOT and the labor burden, $14 million for operational expenses, which is mostly vehicles and electricity, and then $14 million for our capital project. And so within that is the $4 million that was mentioned earlier for the sidewalk repair. So this is our fiscal 21. And so you can see from a capital perspective, if we're looking at needing 105, we're sitting at 14 right now. So we have some work to do on that end. As we move to slide 9, these are just some historical numbers. I thought it was really interesting. I had not taken a deep dive into impact fees and working with some members of my team, they pulled a lot of information together. But you can see in 2015, about 3.1 million, and that's transportation. 2018, 3.5, 2020, 5.1. And what we saw from some of the heat maps is the areas of concentration tend to kind of morph and drift around the city, but generally speaking, they're in that urban core. So you can see this is a 6-year total that north side, and this is by the Park Service areas, north side about 14.8 million, south side 6.9 million, and west side 2.8 million. So it's if you look at that 5.1 million, I believe that's the number I used going forward. So we're glad to have it, but it's not necessarily a significant amount of the overall picture. Moving to slide 10, I've lumped these together because the conversations with our state agencies and our federal agencies have basically been very close to being the same. We've all been told that the city needs to, and I'm paraphrasing here, so I should have dropped the quotes, but develop a track record for delivering projects when you schedule them to be delivered. So it's been impressed upon us the schedule element of a project, and that we need to develop the skill to be building projects when we say we're going to build projects. And so we're talking about strategies to do that, certainly not the scope for this presentation, but I think there's some encouragement in there because it means that we have room for improvement and we have room to grow. And I believe we can do both of those. There's a lot of emphasis that can be placed on the federal process. And we do think we need to be playing that game. But the thing to remember when we talk about federal funding is that a minimum, we're talking 40% match. Typically it's 20%, typically it's 40. And so, my observation has been that through the years tends to be the local match that can prevent us from really making the strides that we can within the TIP and getting our projects federally funded. So, I want people to really understand that when you hear someone talk about, well, let's fund these federally, there are requirements that come with that money, and one of them is the local match. So you have to have the money to pursue those opportunities. And so we talked about being more strategic, that almost acting like a sales function within DOT, that as we identify projects, we'll match them with the funding opportunities so that we have our best shot to receive partnership funding. And so the fourth bullet has a little bit of editorializing, but I think all roads, no pun intended, lead back to local dollars and what we control. And so I want to get to the one lever that is a local item that we have right now that we do control. So on slide 11, I've just given some data on the current T-SPLOS, and for the sake of this presentation, I'm calling it T-SPLOS 1.0. So the program collections began in May of 2017, and they run through April of 2022. The current program is 4/10. Oh, I did that wrong. It's 4/10 of a penny. So yeah, I did that right. Put percentage in. It's 4/10 of a penny. We have the ability to go to a half. Prior to COVID, our average monthly collection was averaging about $4.5 million per month. The last 2 months, we've actually gotten back to $4.5 million per month. So we feel pretty good about where that is. So you can estimate 55 million, somewhere in there is what we're looking at the current T-SPLOS. Total program about 260 million. So tying the 260 million back to the total of 2.6, you can see there's a 10x multiplier in there. So I want to talk just briefly too about what T-SPLOS could look like. And so T-SPLOS 2.0 is just meant to give it a different designation. But let's look at what it could potentially do. So if you assume that T-SPLOS 1 ends in April of 22, if you picked up in May of 22 and proceeded for the next 5 years, that would be the duration of your 2.0. There's the ability to increase to half of a penny. which that doesn't sound like much, but it's a pretty significant jump. And so you can see just from an estimation side, we essentially go from about 55 million per year to a 72 million. And so we've toyed with some numbers as to how we could go back to the 3 asset classes and divvy those up. I think the consensus is that we would really like to see the majority of such a program go to sidewalks. And so these are just for numerical purposes, but you can see if you look at it from a council perspective, the 2.0 could end up being about a $6 million per year, $30 million per district boost. So, if you look again at citywide, we have 4 million. This would take it to about 6. And then we just looked at how we might break those down. And the thought was about half for sidewalks, 40% for paving, and 10% for bridges, and get back to the blocking and tackling that's so important to the city's infrastructure. And so that's just a high level discussion. While I was at it on slide 13, I threw this slide in because I've seen programs work well with a tiered approach, and I just wanted to capture that for this discussion, that essentially you actually plan to about 125% of your projected revenue, but there are 3 tiers, and they're prioritized within each tier. So it's a sort of a self-baselining program with many areas, and we're actually guilty of it in Atlanta. There's not a lot of talk about what happens if you over-collect. We were headed for a bit of an over collection, but thanks to COVID, that kind of wiped us out. So we're back to the original numbers. So, but that's something that needs to be talked about. What happens if it's above the estimate? What happens if it's below the estimate? And kind of lay out those parameters. The last category is on slide 14, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the specific items, but I do want to, I think, share my perspective. So when you look at the city of Atlanta, we're more than just what's contained within the city limits. We have an important regional role that we play. We have important from a transportation perspective, from an economic perspective. And I think that's important because if you look at the AM peak, most of the region's coming to Atlanta. And so I believe we could argue that a 500,000 person population in a 5 million person region means that the Atlanta residents carry a pretty significant infrastructure maintenance burden. And I believe you could argue that the burden actually exceeds the benefit because of the fulfillment of our role in the regional economy, which we certainly want to do, and it certainly is important. But the maintenance and state of good repair side of the city of Atlanta is really different than most any community within the region. And so I think we need to talk about that, because these 3 funding opportunities potentially do is it shifts who pays from the Atlanta resident to the resident of the region. And so we need to talk about that. And so this isn't meant to promote or to even really analyze, but we've talked about the speeding being such a big deal, and it is a big deal. It's horrible. And so while I really genuinely want to see people slow down, there would be revenue that was produced from automated speed enforcement. And so we need to have the conversation. How do we use that, and what does it go into? Because at the end of the day, the safest sidewalks are going to be the ones on the streets with no or slow cars. And so it's the pedestrian experience next to 45, 50, 60 miles an hour is not what we're looking for here. We talk a lot about parking, and so we added a comment about just expansion of the existing paid program, an increase of fees, or potentially a parking tax. We worry that some of those items may be regressive, and that we may be hurting the folks who really don't need the extra burden. But we certainly want to analyze these with a mind towards are we really doing the right thing, or are we just solving a problem that doesn't exist? And so we're going to talk more about that one. The third and fourth, I think, get more controversial and a little fuzzier. But we have talked about what does it look like to toll a city street, and many major cities have done this, and then the cordon pricing to access certain high dense economic zones within the city. Should there be a user fee, and so these are all for discussion. And when you look at the city of Atlanta, I think we have to be projecting ahead. And the Atlanta Regional Commission estimates 2.9 million more people, I should have said more people, by 2050. And so we have the equivalent of Metro Denver moving to the Atlanta region. The challenge for us is going to be, I think we need to be finding room for about 1 million of those people and figuring out how to move them safely through our great city and not continue down the sprawl path, which has really had a negative impact on the number of assets we have to maintain. But that's a forward-looking picture. So I want to jump back. I've taken you out to 2050, and now I want to come back to the current year and play with some numbers here. So we've gone over these items, the what makes up our current financial picture. And so that's the total there is about $90 million a year. That's pretty good. So the challenge for us though is that back to doing the math, that really puts us in that 30-year category. So if kind of estimating from tables is not your thing, I actually went ahead and did the math. So 2.625 billion, 90 million, that's roughly 30 years. So we're in the right ballpark, but there's a big asterisk that needs to be discussed on this page, and it's that T-SPLOST does not go in perpetuity. So we have to also look at what it looks like without T-SPLOST. And so excluding the T-SPLOST, we're at 39 million per year, trying to bite into a $2.625 billion program. That'll take us 67 years. I think I will probably have retired by then, but that's a pretty significant duration there. And so then, we've also addressed, what's reasonable. We don't want to be so aspirational that we set ourselves up for failure, or that we communicate a message that can't be achieved. And so I've taken that FY21 budget and I've just fiddled with it a little bit. And so at the general fund level, 14 becomes 20 by fiscal 25. I believe the continued growth in the city will continue to see the economy grow, and just it's a bit aspirational, but I don't think it's unreasonable. The impact fees, I know there are changes coming. I don't mean to be addressing that, but we bumped that number up a little bit. Nothing significant in the theme of the whole total, but it's still an important piece. The state and federal picture is a little more difficult to predict. So I plugged in a conservative number at 20 million. I do believe we're going to get more efficient at project delivery and more effective at chasing the money. I used the 70 million from the previous slide, and then because we're talking 25 and we need some goals, I put in 10 million for innovative finance, not really targeted at any one of those, but just I think an attainable number to get to. If we had built a model where we said that the 10% of our overall financial picture, 10 to 15, came from these innovative techniques, we're not I think overshooting there. And so if you take the 135 million and go back into your 2.625 program, slide 21, we're looking at 20 years. And so I think that's a very, very reasonable plan. So I was encouraged as I crunched some of the math. I was expecting that to be a little higher. And so it's attainable within 20 years. We may see more growth, we may see more opportunities, but what I would say is it's going to take this type of commitment. It's going to take this 20-year perspective. This isn't something that in 2 years we're going to turn around and say the sidewalk problem is solved. It's going to be with us for a little while. And But I do think that this is a reasonable program. So as we move forward together, I believe this is what we're talking about, a $2.625 billion program, and our goal by 25 to hit 135 million. Not entirely out of reach there. So more opportunities for improvement, but at the end of the day, our estimate to complete would land 20-year time frame. And I think those are all very reasonable assumptions. And so if we jump to slide 22, I'm going to wrap this up real quickly. There are some important takeaways. Even if we need to sharpen up some of the numbers, there are some important takeaways. The first one is the general fund will never be enough. And so we have to look at how we fund these outside of general fund. And we think it'll grow. We think we'll see more. But as you can see from the scale of these numbers, it's not going to do it. The second bullet point here, I actually think is the most important. We've got to take control of this for ourselves. The local financial control is a must, and it's a focus on the next 2 decades. And as the saying goes, it really does take money to make money, and we need to be smart about where we're spending our money. We need to be smart about where we are reserving as match for federal opportunities, knowing that federal opportunities take a little longer. Our thought was maybe the complete streets are more focused on the TIP funding, and we really zero in on just the basic state of good repair with what we see at the local level. I believe that this discussion of next Peace Loss needs to happen. It's the most impactful tool right at our fingertips. And I would argue that if that amount isn't there, the math shows pretty clearly what happens. It goes to essentially a 70-year delivery cycle. And then the last comment is about the innovative finance. It's important. We need to have these discussions, and they need to be eyes wide open discussions. But these will really have more long-term effects, mid and long-term effects, but they're still vital near-term conversations. And so I want to wrap this up and then get into the discussion. But as we like to sum it up on slide 23, follow us on social media. We have the 3 handles there, and are always available, and look forward to the engagement. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn things back over to you.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Commissioner Rowan. One quick thing I'd like to say is Councilmember Jennifer I joined way earlier, and I wasn't able to interrupt to bring her in, but thank you for being here, Councilwoman Ide, and thank you for this presentation, Commissioner Rowan. It is heavy on numbers, but this is what we wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about how to fund projects. There's no lack of desire from any, commissioner of transportation. All of the city council members are interested in expanding our sidewalks and improving our sidewalks and maintaining them, as well as the administration and everybody. It's just a function of how to pay for them. And you laid out a good case in explaining how they are funded and how we can expand funding, but also how long it's going to take to do all that we need to do. So this is a 20-year horizon with things being, opportunities to engage each time to get some projects done. I have some speakers that have texted me to let me know they want to speak. I'll reserve my questions to the end. So, Mr. Faroki, you texted me first. Please go ahead and ask Mr. Rowan any questions you have.
Thank you, Chairman Dickens. Appreciate it. And thank you, Commissioner Rowan, for your presentation and the work you all put into this. I've got a handful of questions. I'll try and be efficient and quick to be respectful of my colleagues' time. One is, just to be clear, the numbers that have been shared today are based on an analysis of sidewalks, roads, bridges in need of repair today, meaning that, and I think you mentioned this, but I just wanted to be clear that a road that is in, for example, a road that's in good condition today, that may not be in good condition 10 years from now, is not contemplated in these numbers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So in short, this is
100% today's need, and so those numbers could go up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we're already playing catch up, but even if we were to catch up to these numbers, odds are there would still be additional catch up to play as other elements of our infrastructure deteriorate over time, which is the way it works. Okay.
That's correct.
And you mentioned that you didn't do that analysis, but at some point, will there be some sort of forecast for how we actually do catch up, even if it's a 30, 40, 50-year time frame?
Yes, sir.
The maintenance cycle is on, that we're running kind of an up-to-date maintenance push, I suppose.
Yeah, and typically what happens there is there's an assumption of a percentage of rate of deterioration. The thought being that the more we catch now, the less that number is in the future. But there is, as I mentioned, that gap there, and we can easily estimate what we think that number is going to be based upon the condition data that we have.
Okay, great. I think that would be helpful for us to just get our arms around the enormity of what it takes for us to, if we were to someday be a city that took care of its stuff in an up-to-date fashion, how long that would take for us to catch up.
We'll update that, sir.
Second question. One of the funding mechanisms that exists today, just by nature of there's money that sits there, is with the CIDs. Was that factored in at all? And I know it's a limited footprint in the city, whether it's in Buckhead or Midtown or downtown or some of the smaller CIDs. Is that a potential funding source for those geographic footprints in the city?
So it certainly is, yes, sir. A couple of things. We didn't want to make any commitments on their behalf, and so this was really meant to look at the things that we control. But that would be another item in our advantage is the partnership with CIDs.
Great. One thing that I'm hoping that we will get as a council, and frankly the public, to the extent they're interested in it, will get, is a street-by-street analysis of the sidewalk needs, both expansion and repair, and I suppose roads as well, because that work has been done too through LIDAR. Will that be available at some point for us to see, so that we can maybe put a finer point on some of these numbers?
Let me talk to my GIS team. I know the road data is in the system. I know we've been working on the sidewalk. I need to ask the question about what type of access people can have, because I know I can go in and look at streets and see what those numbers are. I'm not certain what the public's able to see. So let me follow up with you on that one. Okay.
I do think that folks are, and I don't mean just council members, but I think folks would be hungry to say, hey, there's, of our sidewalk infrastructure, 10% is falling apart. Really, it's in horrible shape, and 30% is in acceptable, but medium shape, and vice versa. All of them down the line. I think that would be helpful to see, just from a prioritization perspective, in addition to the expansion opportunities and needs we have.
Certainly. Yes, we'll pull that together.
Okay. Earlier, a month or two ago, when you first put out a number for us on sidewalks, I think it was around $750 million. Now we're at $950 million. And I think, if I recall correctly, that $750 million, the way you had phrased it was, of that $750 million, $500 for expansion and $250 for repair. And I'm just curious where that extra $200 million came into play and how you would allocate that between expansion and repair.
Yeah, so if there's actually an interim stop there, because my number was just based on the concrete itself, the volume of concrete that gets poured in place. When we presented to Transportation Committee in September, we updated the number, and so we included the things like the right-of-way, the utilities, having to build minor retaining structures. So I had used a number that was just an estimate based on just the sidewalk, and then we pulled a number that was a renew number that factored in everything. And so that's where that jump came from. It was an attempt to capture everything that was inclusive. And so the presentation to committee at the time, the department's update, the one that Doug did, we had to come back and add and calculate the repair number based on the data. So it still works out to be that same 1 to 2 ratio. So we're actually working on a prioritization model where we can score these streets and say, we believe these are the ones in the highest need. I don't know that there's a magical ratio for how to do them. We really want to get it more into the elements of risk, and we've introduced some of the mobility and equity and safety factors that are going to go into this prioritization. But I could see probably our first update in 21. We spent some time talking about our proposed prioritization model and get into the details of that. What I've talked about with the team is what I envision is a project list, and we get down to the point where we're looking at the next 5 to 10 years, and we're saying these are kind of how the projects are shaking out. Obviously, things change over time, but I want to stay away from the kind of boxing myself in with a percentage for each. It may very well fluctuate just depending on funds that are available and how projects get ready to be delivered.
Okay, terrific. I have 2 more questions, and I'm done, Chairman Dickens. One is, I presume that none of the funding streams or opportunities that you identified come out of the pocket of adjacent property owners, which I like to see. Obviously, our city law still has yet to be changed. We have held legislation each cycle that would change that. I will, maybe this is less of a question and more of a rhetorical statement. I will take the fact that none of the funding streams that were identified in your presentation as a tacit admission that the city is not going to put the burden of sidewalk repair on property owners.
Well, I very intentionally left that off because of the controversial nature, but I do think we need to have that discussion. One of the things that we're not going to put this in this discussion because I think it just muddies the water. But one of the things that we're talking about is with this wave of repair requests, city code is what it is, and so this is a discussion that needs to be had going forward because as the department, we have no choice but to follow city code. And so I don't think it's an admission of anything. It's very similar to the CIDs. We put the items in here that we control. And I think that's what's important is what do we control? Are we going to go and cite property owners and levy fines? I don't know. But I think those discussions need to be had.
Well, I would challenge you on that to say the city, whether it's the new DOT or the old Public Works, has not been following city code by choosing not to cite property owners for dilapidated sidewalks or absent sidewalks, which is the right call, in my opinion. We shouldn't be doing that. But I mean, do you have an example of any time in your tenure where we have cited a property owner for not repairing their sidewalk?
My understanding was there was an attempt in 2017 to start citing the property owners. I was not involved with that, but there has not been any attempts since I've been with the city.
Okay. Yeah, that's obviously this is a different discussion, but I do think it is relevant and tangential, but we don't, I know it's not the focus of your presentation today, which I appreciate. I think it pushes us in the right direction. I think all of us on this committee and on the call are eager to see us address a lot of our infrastructure backlog, and commend you and your team for standing up and working with us on it. It's refreshing to see, and I'm happy to see us moving forward. Any specific, other than moving toward a new T-SPLOS, any specific action you think the politicians in the room or the city needs to take over the next 12 months to start to make this a priority?
You know, I think the biggest thing is going to be first of next year when we start talking about how we prioritize. Anything we can do that gets the city on one city on one page, because keeping in mind that we're really trying to put our best foot forward with the state and the feds seeking more money, and so I do appreciate the constructive feedback and the interactions that you and I have, Mr. Councilmember. At the end of the day, I think we're all trying to get to the same thing. And so this has been a good process, and I hope we see more of the same kind of interaction.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Chairman Dickens. That's all I have.
No, thank you, Councilmember Faroki, for those good questions, very detailed. And, you know, it's important for us to dig into the numbers. I wanted to make sure that for the public that might have joined late, we have 11 out of the 15 council members on this work session after all day Monday being on council meetings and Tuesday all day being on council meetings to come back on Wednesday to do this work session. I really applaud you guys and thank you. It just shows how important sidewalks are. Before I turn it over to Ms. Overstreet, who has a set of questions, I wanted to reiterate who's all on the call. We have Overstreet, Westmoreland, Faroki, Smith, Shepard, Massacite, Hillis, Winslow, Brown, I, and myself, along with, of course, Commissioner Rowan and council staff. Let's go to Councilmember Overstreet, who is the Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee.
Oh, thank you, Chair Dickens, especially for acknowledging the fact that we are all very, very committed to doing the city's work. Thank you. I do have a few questions because don't want to give the wrong answers when people are asking me these questions. So, Commissioner Rowan, on slide 5, it was a slide that had all of the particular numbers for quite a few different areas of paving and not just sidewalks. And I want to try to better understand the reason for that. You know, why are we looking? I know this is a sidewalk work session, and I want to make sure that everyone understands why you included all of those other areas like the roadways and the asphalt and the bridges and the infrastructure. You know, why is that lump necessary? Because as I looked at it, you know, it looked like a total need of $2.6 billion, but yet when we just talk about the sidewalks, it's really just $950 million. And I really want to understand what the lump is about. Is that a T-Splice reason, or, you know, why would we look at all of that instead of just the sidewalks for now?
Sure, no, that's an excellent question. The answer is mainly a technical one. You know, the sidewalks are very important. There's no denying that, but we can't be so myopically focused on sidewalks that we forget about the other asset classes. And I think just as important as sidewalks will be our roadway repair and our bridge rehabilitation. You know, I'm not sure how the future looks if we're focused on sidewalk infrastructure and we're having to condemn and close bridges. And so I'm sorry. No, and then the conversation as far as how you pay for the projects, it's really the same conversation. So if you ask me how would we pay for the bridges or how would we pay for the streets, I would give you the same presentation, just adjusting the numbers for those specific items. So I wanted to show the really the total state of good repair, because you can see even in the scale of the numbers that sidewalk is almost half of what we're talking about when we talk about the needs for the city.
Yeah. So what comes to mind is what I saw in the news recently, where a wheelchair person actually couldn't touch the button because the button wasn't placed in the right spot. And I believe Councilmember Faroki had something to do with making sure that that area was made ADA compliant so that the person could use that actual crossway instead of having to go way down the street to another area to cross over because they couldn't push the button in order to just cross the street right there. And my situation in District 11 is one that every button is untouchable. by anyone that really can't navigate the grass or the dirt. So, and these are people that are actually reliant on, public transportation. So they're walking either in the street or the grass or the dirt. So I know you understand the importance of this sidewalk conversation, and I am so delighted that we are having this work session because this is the way we get to where we're trying to go. But I want to make sure that we are laser focused on making sure that we're not lumping everything together in such a way that it seems like all or nothing. And I want to make sure that the need for sidewalk is a conversation that is at the top of the list because we've got injuries and people that can't, high injury networks and people that cannot navigate because they don't have a sidewalk broken or in good repair. And I just want to make sure we keep that conversation at top of mind. So much so, in that same vein, one more question about that. Why are we choosing the word construction instead of installation? Because when I have conversations with different constituents, everyone seems to understand installation. That means a sidewalk wasn't there. There's no sidewalk there, and that we need to figure out how to get a sidewalk in place. Whereas construction could be a sidewalk that was taken out in a certain spot because of ill repair or any other reason, and then replaced. And I just want to know, are you reading that much into it, or does construction mean installation? Does it mean brand new sidewalk that wasn't there before? And is there an opportunity where we could all have the same language that we're using and it means one thing? Just help me with that.
Sure. No, that's a great question, and you're actually, I think, getting a preview into my semantics. So being an old construction guy, we repair sidewalks and we construct sidewalks. So in this case, construction is synonymous with installation. So it's a quick change from one term to the other. But you'll still catch me from time to time referring to new sidewalks as constructing sidewalks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I've got this hypersensitivity where sidewalks are concerned. So
sure.
I had to ask that just to be clear. Also, so Councilmember Faroki also mentioned CIDs, and that was actually on my list also because no matter what I do, I cannot seem to get a CID for District 11. I really thought I was on to something for a little while at the beginning of 2019, and somewhere around the end of 2019, the conversation went away, and I started back up again 2020 with a different group, and we still have no CID. So I just want to make sure that when we start talking about funding, I know CIDs and all other matches are the low-hanging fruit, but that's how we build and resource inequitably, because I want just to make sure that everyone understands that in areas where there are no CIDs, that doesn't mean that we should not be on the list of repair. And again, I am still working like crazy to actually get a CID of some sort for Southwest Atlanta, but right now we just don't have it. But at the same time, we are we have several high injury network streets and no sidewalks at all on some very dangerous streets. So, I just want to hear your conversation around what happens if there's no CID.
Yeah, so I think what that gets into, council members, is we start looking at as we drill into the district needs. Obviously you're going to be different than say downtown. And the thought is, if you look at the numbers, so for example, right now, we're trying to divvy up a $4 million pie citywide. If we went with more of a state of a good repair approach moving forward with the picture that I put together for FY25, then instead of fighting over $4 million for sidewalks, we would be looking at numbers more like 6 per district. And so our thought is the more that we can get assistance from the outside on projects and match our projects up with them, that's actually less that we're having to spend, which I think then creates opportunity for the outer stretches of the city, such as District 11. And so I've never started a CID. I've managed a couple, but I don't know how to help you on that one.
I know, and it really it's intensive, but I actually have a group that's willing to help. That the Aerotropolis CID is very they're quite good at what they do, and they're willing to actually help in getting this a CID going here in the district. But we've still not had luck with groups that are willing to stick with it and make it happen. When we look at the mobility and the equity and the safety, I will tell you that sitting in council meetings and in those committee meetings and hearing that DPW had they went capital project after capital project after capital project, and we missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars of projects because we didn't have a match or we didn't have a CID. It just further divides the investment per side of town. And I just want to be sure that, we are looking at equity and mobility and safety like you've promised. And pretty much that is it for me.
If I may, Councilmember, just a quick reply. We felt the same thing, that we feel like the next big discussion we have as a group, now that I think we've had some sticker shock from the numbers, is to start talking about how we prioritize. And so, it's feeling like maybe the first one out of the gate in 2021, we're talking about our approach to prioritization.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for the presentation and your ear about, sidewalks and where we are with funding and everything in between, because all of these are much needed conversations. And, at the end of the day, we just have a whole lot of work to do, and we want to make our entire city something that is, worthy of everyone having a great quality of life. And sidewalks is important to that. And so thank you very much for this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Great questions from our Vice Chair, Councilmember Marcy Collier-Overstreet. And we have been joined by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond. So next speaker that we'll go to, next questions will come from Councilmember Dustin Hillis and then Councilmember Antonio Brown.
Thank you, Chairperson Dickens. One of the things that Josh or Commissioner Owen brought up was impact fees, and won't go too far into that since we know how that is progressing, and it's going to be handled by CDHS. I'm looking forward to being back on that committee this coming year. But I'm looking forward to getting that on par with where it needs to be. A few other specific questions. Council members are very familiar with our, I guess you'd call it a sidewalk waiver fund. And I brought this up in previous Transportation Committee meetings when I was on the committee, and myself and Commissioner Rowan have also had discussions. But one of the biggest issues with sidewalk waivers is, we use our our formula, so to speak, to determine what the sidewalk cost would be. Let someone waive a sidewalk, and then lo and behold, when a council member wants to go out and use that money, let's say they have money from 1,000 feet of sidewalk waivers. Well, they go out and try to build 1,000 feet of sidewalk, and they're told that they can only build, 100 or maybe even 50 or something like that. So my first question related to those funds that's in each district council member account is, where are we at with getting that where it needs to be so it reflects the actual cost of material and construction? And two, I have probably close to $100,000 in my sidewalk waiver fund in District 9, but continually met with that issue when I want to use that money to build, let's say 1,000 feet of sidewalks or something like that. What are some possibilities of, I guess, matching grants and funding sources such as that might be able to be used to build sidewalks, like a 10 or 20% match or something like that? So 2 questions there.
Sure. So with the price that you're talking about, I think there are 2 pieces to be mindful of. There's the unit rate that's used to calculate the amount that's in the waiver, and we can certainly look at that. I don't recall that there's been any movement to change that, but I do know that it's in this market we need to be looking at that, and that takes me to the second point, that really the money that's collected probably needs to be spent as quickly as you get it. Otherwise, you're facing cost escalation in the marketplace, and that's been something that's impacted all of our projects. Is that a dollar doesn't get you as far as it did 3, 4, 5 years ago. Regarding using that money for local match, I quite honestly don't know if there are any legal strings attached to it. If there aren't, I would presume we could look at opportunities to use that money to front other funding opportunities.
Understood, and we'll continue to look into that. At least one other question. You did mention T-SPLOST and how that is a much needed asset going forward as we look into the possibility of renewing that. No pun intended. Renewing that brings up the renew bond. So what do you see the future of bonds in serving our transportation improvement needs?
So I very clearly showed a bit of a bias in my assessment. So bonds were left off of the discussion, and I tried to focus on things that are not debt vehicles. And so obviously the bond could come back into discussion. I think the challenge though is that when you look at the 20-year term that we're talking about, we're really needing to build a more sustainable model, and so that quick infusion from a bond program, I think it would actually be a better practice if we focus just more on this consistent annual spend and not carrying debt along with that. I know other jurisdictions have taken a more of that approach, the pay as you go with projects. And I think that's a good approach to consider first.
Understood. Thank you for that, and that's all my questions for now.
Good deal. Thank you, Councilmember Hillis. Next, we have Councilmember Brown, then Councilmember Winslow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowan, let me just start by saying thank you for everything you and your team has been doing to really address the sidewalk issue in the city of Atlanta, as well as my colleagues that have put forth legislation to really bring this issue to the forefront. We recently passed legislation 20-R-4512, speaking to really looking at the feasibility of establishing a workforce trade program for the purposes of training and hiring city employees for transportation infrastructure related construction projects. And I wanted to ask, in your opinion, just how does this plan correlate with that study you've been working on compiling for us to bring in-house certain infrastructure opportunities and hire within the city of Atlanta to really create opportunities for low-income communities?
Sure, and I think there are a lot of aspects to this conversation. So I'll hit on some of the big ones, and you know, council member, that we certainly agree on using local projects to support the members of the local community. And so from a program perspective, though, I always believe it's important to decide how much capacity are we able to deliver ourselves. My feeling today is that we don't have enough capacity. We have wonderful people, and it's not meant to in any way put down the work anyone's doing. I've never been so proud of a group of people, but I do think that part of this discussion should be focusing on how do we do more? How can the city be taking control of the sidewalk installation? We do sidewalk repair. We don't do installation. Can we be doing the ADA ramps? I think the growth potential there is tremendous. And I'll give you a little spoiler. I hope that's okay. And addressing your legislation, what's starting to develop is this model where someone could come in as a city employee and work on one of our crews. And be it a sidewalk crew, be it a bridge crew, but start learning the construction business at that level as a member of a crew. And from there, you have tremendous opportunities. We are always in need of good equipment operators. We're always in good need of foremen and shop supervisors. And so there's always going to be a leadership demand there. And it seems that the ones who really do well are the ones who grow up in the construction business. I also believe that after you've seen about maybe 4 or 5 years of construction, that you do have the ability to change paths and take more of the construction and program management approach, where you're actually serving in a technical capacity versus in the implementation side of the work. And so this thing will branch and fork in many different ways, but it really seems like the more we're able to deliver means the more people that we have working on crews. And so from a department perspective, we really need to be looking at the development of our team members. And that's going to be an area of focus. And so I think the opportunities are great. I can share with you, council member, we did do some math on this one. I don't have the slide in this presentation. For the city right now to pour sidewalks, we're a little bit more expensive than what we're seeing from the contractors, but that's to be expected. We don't have the toys that they do, and we don't do as much work as they do. But that's certainly something that will factor into this going forward.
Hey, Commissioner, does the added expense that the city would take on by bringing these opportunities in-house and hiring from within the city in order to put people back to work, does it weigh heavier than the burden on the extra costs that we're going to have to take on?
So I think this is my comment is it's really about and I know we were talking about revenue, but I'll jump to the cost side real fast. It's about lowering the unit price for the item. So specifically for concrete, if we can develop the teams that we need and deliver it more cheaply than the contractors can, I believe we would want to scale that up. Right now, it's not that way. But we'll start looking at essentially the ROI calculation. I do believe we have the ability for a certain type of sidewalk, ones where the curb is already there, we already have the right of way, where the grades are favorable, and there's a good portion of that I believe we could be more competitive by in-housing the work, which then goes back to the conversation we've had about the opportunities that it creates for the members of the community.
Absolutely. Commissioner Rowan, I'm so appreciative, and I look forward to seeing that study, and thank you for all the work in this current presentation, and we appreciate you a lot on council.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Councilmember Winslow.
Very good presentation, Commissioner. Had two questions. One is, in terms of our bridges, because you mentioned them, how many do we have that are, I guess, in extreme disrepair, or in disrepair and in need of funding?
So ma'am, I would have to actually go back and talk to the bridge engineer about the specific numbers. He's provided me a couple reports on the financial need on the bridge side, but we really didn't get down into this ranking of the bridges, and so I don't want to give you a bad number there.
Okay.
But it's a number that's easily attainable.
Okay. And you said something about a parking fee. Could you expound a little bit on that? I mean, I guess that was a brainchild of someone.
So we actually put three items together under parking.
Okay.
The first would be just an expansion of our paid parking. So we have a lot of streets that are free, and so we could expand that out to have more paid parking within the city. There's a safe, self-regulating aspect to actually having the metered parking. So that was the first discussion. The second piece was just the hourly rate that we charge for parking. Does that need to be looked at? Could that go up? So that's a discussion. And then the third one is the parking tax, which is essentially an additional amount on top of paid parking. And I'll tell you that one is really not advanced that far down the road, those discussions. Mayor Bottoms has been very clear. She believes there's some regressive aspects to that and has asked us to drill deeper into our analysis, and then we're doing that. But that's important for us. Like I said earlier, we don't want to create problems when we're implementing these type programs. But that's what that third one is. It would essentially be an attempt to transfer some of the costs to the commuter.
Okay, to the driver in a car.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. The city right now, we have about 1.5 million parking spaces for a 500,000 person city. So a lot of folks are coming into Atlanta and parking their cars.
Okay, so we actually have more parking, and then I'll finish up. We actually have more parking spaces than we have need for parking, it sounds like, as of in today's standards.
Well, that would be a topic of debate, but we have our ratio of parking space to citizen is pretty high, though.
Okay. All right. I won't get into that because that kind of gets into something else. But thank you for the report. It was very insightful, and look forward to hearing about more things coming out. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. Glad you're here. So now we're going to go to Mr. Bond, and then after that, Ms. Archibald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, commissioners, for your presentation. I've got just a couple of questions. When we talk about allocating where we want to put sidewalks next, I just want to highlight two streets where I often see people either walking in yards or worse, walking along the street. And that is Beltry and Beltry, what would be considered Beltry Circle, Peyton Road, and Baker's Ferry. I see a lot of pedestrians along those ways, so I don't know how they get amended to be added to the list if they're not already on a list, but wanted to highlight those streets. And then secondly, when you talked about the CIDs for funding for some of these sidewalks, has there been any consideration of perhaps packaging the creation of CIDs in much the same way that we've done over the decades with tax allocation districts, that we would identify, a business district or some combination of perhaps a business, commercial, and somewhat residential area, and kind of program the type of improvements that we want to see, and kind of package it for the community to say, hey, we can make these improvements quicker than the city's regular process if we create a CID for a particular period of time to do XYZ improvements like sidewalks, et cetera.
Yeah, sir. So I'll jump on your first question about the streets that you mentioned. We will certainly take note of those and look at those. None of the longer term evaluation and prioritization has been done, so they've not missed out on anything. I would share though that thanks to members of the community who took me for a ride last year on Peyton Road, in my mind, it's really become the model for traffic calming as well. And so there's a lot of focus on how do we improve conditions on Peyton, because we believe that model will work in other places. Regarding the CIDs, most of what happens with them is controlled by state law. And so we, other than working with them to deliver projects within their district, we've not given any consideration to, how they would be directed in any different way moving forward.
Well, I was just thinking as a funding mechanism, I know there are many other members of the council have also had a conversation with Mr. Griggs over at the Beltline for some innovative funding tools that they're going to come to the city council about. I just wondered if we could repeat the same thing in some of these high need areas. But other than that, though, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to sit in. This has been extremely informative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Bond. I'm glad you're here, and glad everybody's getting a lot out of it. Thank you, Mr. Rowan, for putting the presentation together.
Yes,
next,
sir.
we have Councilwoman Archibald.
Thank you. I saw on one of the slides, and I've been between two meetings, so I apologize, but I saw on one of the slides impact fees. And it's my understanding that currently, due to legislation passed many moons ago, that CIE dollars cannot be used for sidewalks. Did you cover that?
No, ma'am, I did not cover how impact fees are being used or how they can be used.
Okay, so colleagues, that's an important thing for us to tackle. Maybe the Transportation Committee could take the lead. As I understand it, the CIE dollars cannot be used for sidewalks. So whatever that legislative change is, I don't know if it involves going to the state as well, but we really need to be about that business, particularly if we're looking at that as a realistic funding source. So that's just my comment. Thanks.
Yes,
Ms. Archibald, thank you for that. That is very good. That is timely. Mr. Hill has touched on it somewhat, but not the CIE portion of it. And thank you for highlighting that. Mr. Rowan, do you want to kind of just speak a little bit more to that so that everybody will be aware of how the CIE is done, and then how impact fees are limited in that regard?
Sure, and Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly not the legal expert on impact fees, but the way it's been explained to me is that we're seeking to identify projects that increase capacity within the street. So there's certainly a street focus, and so the legal side of it is pretty tight, and what projects qualify and which projects don't.
Okay.
So if I could speak back to that, I'm recommending that we look at ways to be more creative in that area, because there are some restrictions and limitations that I think if we looked at it more carefully would be pretty frustrating.
Right. No, a message taken loud and clear, Councilwoman Archibald. That's a good point. I just took that note, and Ms. Pulandini, I'm sure she's listening. She's taking that note as a takeaway from this, and we will see what legal ramifications and how we can position ourselves to do that, whether that's through legislation with the state or just how we can go about doing that over 2021. So thank you. So, council members, once again, there's 11 of us on the call. It's very good to have this many of us committed to Sidewalk. I wanted to make sure we all had our chance to ask questions. There are about 4 or 5 questions that the public has asked while we have been on this call, but I wanted to make sure that council members all had their questions asked. Anybody else got a question? Okay. I don't know, Ms. Pulandini, were you taking down the questions, or should I just read them off?
If you could read them off, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So we have one from Rebecca Cerna. Of course, we all know she is with the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, and she asked a question. Let's see how to her question relates to the proposed 50% of T-SPLOST 2.0 for sidewalks. How can we make sure sidewalks, both maintenance and construction, end up with the right share in that process? She's communicating about how we did our revamp of T-SPLOST after, we found out some things, and also the revenue model was a little coming in less. So we did a 2.0, and she's saying, how do we make sure sidewalks end up with the right share in that process? Because there'll always be competing priorities, she said, but we think voters will be looking for a strong commitment to sidewalks. Mr. Rowan, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's an outstanding question. And I think in many respects, I tried to start the discussion to push us towards an answer. So I would back up and say the 50-40-10 split was just kind of based on the estimated cost and also what I think the priorities are. So the sidewalks are very important. We do believe that we can make safety improvements even in the paving, like we did on Spring Street, where we dieted the road, took a lane and converted it to a lit lane. But to the question about ensuring it keeps its place at the table, that's where, as we get into these sidewalk segments, what I'm envisioning is that list of sidewalk projects. And so as you build future programs, it's not spend X dollars on sidewalks. It's here's how this sidewalk category breaks down, and here are the most critical needs. And so we would obviously want to carry as many projects forward as we could that we believe the T-SPLOST would support. I did introduce the tiered idea, which is one that I've seen used really well, which is you essentially build a 3-tiered system. The first tier, you have a high level of confidence in your delivery based on your historical collections. I think one of the things that was a challenge for Atlanta on the first T-SPLOST was there was no historical average for those. But I've seen that where you'll basically identify projects that account for 60%, give or take, of your projected revenue. And even within that tier, they're prioritized. And then there's a second tier that'll get you close to 100%. That's kind of your mid-level confidence. And then overshooting. And basically that's there's no guarantee these will get delivered, but if the money's there, they're going to get done in this order. And so it really becomes I think a more transparent approach. I remember, though, years ago, I served actually on a school board's T-SPLOST or E-SPLOST oversight committee. And one of the things you have to be careful of is that things change over time. And so we will have some buckets of money. We actually had a roof issue on one school, but the funding was tied to another school, and legally we couldn't move it. And so that was a challenge. So there's some nuance in how you build these programs, but But to the question, I do believe it's getting more of a project focus when it comes to the sidewalks, not just where are we going to spend the money. And so that's going to really move us into this prioritization discussion next year.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. So there's a couple of questions related to installing or upgrading the sidewalks at adjoining that are adjoining people's property. One is specifically saying, when a commercial development is built, is it the responsibility of the developer to improve/install sidewalks in the right of way? And then another one that's similar to that is, why does current city ordinances make it so hard for a private property owner to install, upgrade sidewalks adjoining their property? So you want to kind of give a update on how sidewalks are done for commercial developments, and who's responsible for the sidewalk upgrades and installations.
Yeah, so with the developments, I mean, each individual development is going to be its own thing. So there's not necessarily a one size fits all, but just generally speaking, where we can, we want to see those right of way improvements put off onto the builder, because that's all part and parcel with the work that they're doing. The question about why is it so hard to upgrade the sidewalks in front of a property, I would love to get that contact information, but I think we need some context there as to where the challenge is lying. Because if it's a property owner who's wanting to do the work, we can certainly assist them to make that happen.
Okay. But sometimes I think do they have to use a city approved vendor, and how many vendors do we have for sidewalk?
Yeah, those are the questions that would be answered during the permit application. I don't know who is how we're handling the contractor end of that.
Okay. Yes, to my knowledge, that there's a certain number of approved vendors and standards, and that some people find it to be a little difficult or a little pricey, but this goes back to Mr. Faroki's point about, most citizens, for sure, residential areas believe that the sidewalk is public domain, and that why should I have to fix a crumbled sidewalk in front of my house? And they might also think that for commercial, but they don't think of it as strongly that the commercial properties are responsible as they do for their own property. They feel like, hey, a residential sidewalk is something for everybody. So the city should come by and do that from, over and over again. And I think your $2.6 million for overall infrastructure and $950 million for sidewalks doesn't contemplate some of that, right? I think we addressed that earlier, that's just for what we have today, not for what will happen 10 years from now on some other sidewalk being crumbled.
That's exactly right. And these are the hard discussions we're going to have. This is along the same lines of, why do I mow the grass that's in the right of way? That's part of my lawn. I don't want it to grow up. That's been an item that's been transferred to me as the property owner. As it sits now, that homeowner is responsible for the maintenance of the sidewalk. And you're spot on. We don't really know what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years. We know that the sidewalk will continue to deteriorate, and it's looking at a typical lifespan, much like a road. It'll last about 20-25 years.
Okay, unless we allow service vehicles and delivery vans and other heavy vehicles to park on the sidewalk.
And I wouldn't say we're allowing it. They're choosing to do so, which is frustrating. The sort of blatant disrespect for the infrastructure. But no, we certainly don't want our sidewalks carrying vehicular traffic.
Right. I mean, it's just too much of that right now. I mean, I know it's COVID, but I see it. It's like, come on, I know you got to get to this building. I know you got to deliver 1,000 packages, but can you not park on the sidewalk? You're just causing it to crumble. Okay, few more questions. Councilmember Carla Smith did text and say there is legislation to not park on the sidewalk. You want to say something to that while we're on that?
We did legislation several years ago to make it illegal to park on the sidewalk, and I think it's 100 for cars and it's 1,000 for trucks. So, I mean, if you see a truck pulled on a sidewalk, either go scream at them or call 911.
Good point. Yeah, I think that was about 3 or 4 years ago because I was still on council when that was done.
Back then, speaking of Rebecca Cerna, I heard she had a question earlier. She is the one that used that as a model when we did the legislation to not park in the bike lanes. So it's $1,000 for trucks to park in a bike lane also. So now cars, $100, and we can always increase those fines because those are city tickets. So we can increase the fines on those if we really want to, have people to stop it, because it'll only take $100 ticket or $1,000 ticket for a delivery truck. I mean, they're not gonna, after they pay a couple of those tickets, they'll put a memo out and tell their drivers not to park in the bike lane or not to park on the sidewalks.
Good, thank you. So to the public, please let as we see them, as you see them, please let the drivers know that's illegal and that you're going to let the police know and they'll write a ticket. And that ticket's going to be $100 or $1,000. So thank you for that, Carla. Now, I did have one more council member say they had a question, Mr. Brown, and then we have 2 public commenters that left a voicemail. So we'll play that, and then I think we only have one other question after that. So, Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, thank you for hosting such an incredible conversation around our city's infrastructure. Really appreciate you. Commissioner Rowan, I know this question would potentially be posed to more of the finance department, even though I believe that you could contribute to figuring out the solution around this. But, one of the things I've been speaking to some bond attorneys about is the possibilities of establishing, because I know we're struggling to figure out where can we get funding to sustain this plan and be able to get more work done within the city. And I wonder what it would take to potentially look into a workforce development bond that would be established, that would work to establish infrastructure jobs within the city of Atlanta, in which the city would do the hiring and provide benefits for these residents and go about it that way. And I know that I put into the legislation before that there's a way where we could potentially look at kind of how when we get our paychecks, there's a health insurance deduction that comes out of it. Maybe we add a payroll deduction to this option that would allow us to pay down on the debt service and be able to continue and sustain the program. So I was just curious. I mean, it may be a question where it's going to take a bunch of us in a room kind of working through, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And did it seem like it could be a viable option for when we consider bonds and funding infrastructure within the city?
Yes, Councilmember Brown. I think you hit on some key points in there. The first is that this is an area of additional investment, and it's an important area. So we need to have the greater discussion that how could we build such a program, one that sustains itself. I would be coming at this more from a implementation and cost side. The bond markets are not an area of real expertise for me. I just have been brought up that work with the budgets that you can control and avoid the debt vehicles. And so, to be honest, sir, I can't give a thumb up or a thumb down because I don't know enough about the details. But I can assure you we're fully committed though to providing the data that's needed as those discussions are had in the future.
Awesome. And do you think, Commissioner, that as you're compiling, kind of your study on this workforce program, do you believe we could also explore potential bond options? I mean, could we bring in finance and work with your team to explore these potential options?
Yes, sir. I see a model similar to what we're doing tonight. We can make some assumptions and define the program and estimate cost and kind of zero in on a number that we're comfortable with, and then we can shift gears and talk about how that gets paid for. And I think it's always healthy to look at all the mechanisms at your disposal to fund things like that. And so I've talked with other council members about sort of this: define the program, quantify the program, and then start looking at the funding side of it. I think this is just a good problem-solving routine that we can get ourselves into.
I definitely agree. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Rowan. I appreciate all of your insight.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're winding down. Let's listen to a couple of the public comment and see if we have any comments related to the public comment. And I see one more question that came in from social media, and then we can kind of talk next steps and wrap up. Ms. Pulandini, do you mind playing the 2 public comments?
Just one moment, please.
Hello, my name is Morgan Jacobus. I'm calling on behalf of the Martyr Army, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering residents of Metro Atlanta to improve their transit ridership experience. I'm leaving a comment for the Transportation Committee, specifically for any distractions pertaining to the prioritization of sidewalks to fund. Martyr Army has been collecting data on the condition of bus stops since February 4th as part of Operation Bus Stop Census. This effort collected data on the conditions of sidewalks around bus stops. Paved, flat, unobstructed, and continuous sidewalks are big factors in creating safe, accessible, and dignified bus stops. We believe any process of prioritizing which sidewalk projects are funded first should take nearby transit facilities into account. Martyr Army is open to sharing our data with the City of Atlanta and the Atlanta City Council for the purposes of this prioritization. If you're interested, please reach us by voicemail at 404-593-0966. It's 404-593-0966. Or by email at contact@martyrarmy.org. Thank you and have a nice day.
This is Kevin Posey. My comment is, while maintenance of existing sidewalks is crucial, some thought must be given to how poor conditions will be discovered. I reported via ATL 311 that the 2200 block of OPU Road Southeast sidewalk has been completely covered by a vine. That was several months ago, but it has still not been cleared. If city staff ignores it and complaints filed via proper channels, how will maintenance issues get on a list for repair? Thank you.
Thank you for playing those 2 comments. They actually are both really good. So before I go to you with your thoughts on it, Mr. Rowan, one is I would love to the Martyr Army folks, I would love to, I think the council would welcome your assessment of sidewalks or missing sidewalks or damaged, uneven sidewalks near bus stops. That would be very helpful for us. I believe that between the city and MARTA, we can look at a way together to partner to find funds and resources to make our MARTA bus stops more, have better sidewalks and more user friendly. So that information is definitely going to be helpful. So let's, Ms. Pulandini, let's kind of cue them up for some time to talk early in 2021. And if they have their data ready now, they can send it so that we can kind of prep it and look over it over the holiday. And they can send it to you, myself, and Mr. Rowan, and we can get it to the rest of the city council. So, Mr. Rowan, you got any thoughts on that before we go to the second?
I thought it was an excellent call. You know, the impacts of sidewalks on transit ridership. We just did a presentation this week with the Council for Quality Growth and entitled, transit and walking. And the two go hand in hand. And so he used the magic word data. We'll gladly take that and really want to discuss with the folks at MARTA Army this prioritization model we're putting together. We'd like to get their perspective.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page. So let's get that into here, and we'll make sure that MARTA is aware of that. We definitely want to make sure that we have sidewalks going to schools, senior centers, because a lot of them are in wheelchairs and they need to not be in the street where I've seen them sometimes. We've done a better job of getting sidewalks near senior centers and, of course, near hospitals like the Shepherd Center, et cetera, but just more on a bus stop would be good. So going to the second comment, that's actually more of a clearing the right-of-way. So as we've moved from public works to transportation, Mr. Rowan, how do you deal with overgrowth, and what is the mechanism for that? When people call 311, they send it over to your team, or do they still send it to public works? And then what's the service level agreement timeline for us to get overgrowth cleared?
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics of this location, but I do think we have a little educating that we need to do. There have been discussions about all things right-of-way coming over to DOT. That hasn't happened yet. So right now, the delittering and the grass cutting and items like that are done by the Public Works Department. We're happy to help coordinate it. In fact, we'll get somebody to go take a look at that location this week and assess what's happening. What we've been finding is that generally there's a combination of issues for other departments. It could be overgrowth, it could be trash, it could be a drainage issue, it could be a pavement issue. And so we'll get one of our guys to go take a look and give an assessment. So I didn't write down the address fast enough. So if I can get that emailed to me, we'll have somebody take a look.
All right. We'll make sure you get that. Ms. Pulandini, you can pull that and get it over to him, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All righty. Good. So that is our public comment. We have one more email that came in. One more, and that is, where did I here? This was from somebody that said, okay, question on YouTube. Roughly how many parking spaces does the city own / control? Can a parking fee be implemented just on those or on all parking spots? We have a number. Yeah.
We do, and I'll have to ask the parking team. I don't want to throw out the wrong one tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tejas, for your question. I don't think Mr. Ron or I or anybody came prepared with parking, the number of parking spaces as part of this sidewalk conversation, but we'll see if we can't get you that. If you can email us.
I've got his email address, Mr. Chair. We'll get an answer to him.
Oh, you got his email. Okay, you got it.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right, good. So next steps. So we've got the public comment out, and they've got their comments in. We've got the questions that came in. Council members, I don't know if y'all have any thoughts about what's next, but we're going to be going into 2021. And, you made some suggestions, Mr. Rowan, about how to fund this stuff for 20 years. I think that we probably need to make sure we're, good with the finance folks. Also, We have some things that we need to clear up regarding impact fees, and to see how we can fund those things that way. We have conversations about who's in control of who's responsible for paying for sidewalks in front of residential spaces. That adds a number of costs or takes a number away and puts it on the public is how it is currently. So going over all those, what did you kind of have in mind as we go through the first half of 21, getting ready for our FY22 budget that starts around March, our conversation? What do you see, Mr. Rowan, as a way to approach this?
Yeah, I think you actually hit many of the key items. So, knowing that we're still in this pandemic mode, I'm not going to make many assumptions on the budget process. But if I would maybe we look at something conservative. We hold serve for another year, something like that. I think we need to focus on the bigger picture, to be honest with you. I think we're going to move through this period of time, and we're going to be just fine, and we're going to recover. And the big thing is let's talk about the role of TSLOS and what that can look like going forward, and let's talk about prioritization and really kind of get a handle on how we make decisions. And I think these are both kind of the citywide One Atlanta discussions, but it'll start bringing in the flavor from the districts, and so that's going to be important. So I think right out of the chute we're talking priorities and TSLOS.
And we're also talking, so yes or no's, and I see you, Mr. Hillis, with the questions, but before I go to you, but also, Mr. Rowan, we're talking about doing smaller projects better. And that's something that if anybody came in late, they might have, or you breeze through that. Can you just spend a little bit of time talking about that? How we have some really big projects, and those have a lot of moving parts to it, and pricing moves because construction costs go up, and COVID and all kinds of anything can come up. But there's a lot of small projects that are in the $2 million range or less that we can knock out and get a lot of constituent satisfaction, and they see progress. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. In fact, I really believe strongly that when we learn to excel in about the $3 million range project-wise, we're really going to see a lot of progress. And so it goes back to the conversations that we've had, and it's kind of a twofold purpose. I actually didn't touch on the second purpose. But the first is, in talking to executive leadership with our partner agencies, they've made it clear, Atlanta, you have to learn to deliver your projects when you say you're going to deliver them, because that's so critically important to how the funding works at a regional level. The worst thing that can happen to the transportation improvement plan is for a project to get into the plan and die. And we don't want to do that. So we have to better vet our projects. We have to align them with the funding that's coming available. And so once we build that reputation that, look, we're getting these projects done, I believe there's going to be more money available. The other reason why I like the smaller projects, and I thank you for bringing this up because I totally missed the other important factor, is that we really need to build, as we work to in-house, I believe we still need to be working to build our contracting capacity, and specifically our disadvantaged contractors. And so we fully support the programs that are afforded through OCC. We'd like to see more local contractors. We'd like to see more local DBE contractors. And I believe in many cases, a big project will set a growing firm up to fail. But we've already talked with the procurement department about, could we start unbundling some projects and then have smaller ones that then align with the capabilities of our local contracting community, with the ultimate goal of, can we grow that local contracting community? So there's a lot of energy around smaller projects in quantity. And then at the end of the day, it's psychologically, it feels good to finish a project. And so we're going to be looking more at the the breaking these projects into pieces so that we can be delivering before we move on to the next section.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Glad we talked about that so people can see how we will focus on smaller projects, local contracting, DBE contracting more. Okay, Mr. Hillis, you have the final word, final question.
Thank you, Chairperson Dickens. We did spend a lot of time speaking about T-SPLOST tonight, so just so we're all on the same page, what is the timeline for the current T-SPLOST, and what action would the city have to take to put a renewal on a ballot, and when would that happen? Would we have to go to the state to add that additional 0.1%? So timeline and operationally, how would that work?
Sure. So as far as the percentage goes, we already have that 1/10 capacity, so the program can be bumped up. The current T-SPLOST, the last collection month is April of 2022. So it's still a little ways away. It's closer than it feels. One of the things about your T-SPLOST programs is even though you stop collecting, there are still projects to be built. So there will be another 18 to 24 months of continuing construction just to get that money spent. So ideally, I would be looking at May of 22. And so, we essentially have, I believe, this next year and 2021 to talk about role of T-SPLOST, what that program looks like, and maybe be ready for a spring of 22 referendum if that's what the city leadership chooses.
Thanks for that. And just, but if we did wait that long, then we would lose at least a few months of collection. No, correct?
Yeah, there would likely be a little gap, but a few months is certainly not the end of the world because the projects and your first program were funded, and we're really just talking about launching the next program. It goes back to the don't leave money on the table, but it wouldn't be the worst thing if there was a gap in there. You just don't want it to be going on for years.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairperson Dickens.
All right. Same to you. Thank you all. So we just covered next steps. I don't think there's anything else for us to do. If no one else has any questions or comments, Mr. Ron, you have anything final to say?
No, everyone have a great evening and happy holidays if I don't see you between now and then.
Well, you're here from the Transportation Committee. next Wednesday you get to hear from us one more time. We hear from you.
Well, I don't get to wish you holiday greetings though when we're going through legislation.
Okay. All right. Well, good. That's it. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, council members. Really appreciate, to have this many council members here. With all of us, we could vote on something and have a veto-proof piece of legislation if you guys just wanted to do something dangerous tonight. But with 11 council members on the call. So I appreciate you all. It really shows the city how much we care about sidewalks. So let's get to work next year on doing even more. Thank you all and have a good night.
Good night. Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.